Hi everybody! Welcome to week 6 of our English 3180 online course. I've got a lot to share with you this week. In this video, I want to go over our weekly activities and readings like I usually do. I'll launch into a brief mini lecture covering some of the high points from those readings. But before I close out this video, I do want to talk to you guys about a project that's coming up for next week. So next week's going to look a lot different than what we're used to. We won't have any readings. We're just going to be working on the first step of your overall semester project, which will kind of serve as like a midway point, maybe midterm, I guess you could say. But nobody panic. We're going to talk about it at the end of this video. So I'm just going to switch right over to my screen share view and get right to it. Okay. So here we are, week 6. We are looking at some super cool stuff about some Chinese rhetorical traditions, both overview and deep dive stuff. So I think it's going to be really fun as you guys tackle these readings. Of course, we have chat check-in number 6, and the prompt for that this week is, I hope, kind of a fun, sort of grab bag question, giveaway, goofball, I don't know. Pick your G word. But I want to know about costumes. So it's October, right? Maybe we're thinking about Halloween. Maybe we're not. I still haven't decided if I'm going to let my kids go trick-or-treating or not. The jury's still out. But my one child desperately wants to dress up as a griffin for Halloween, because we read a series of books and there were griffins in them, and now she's obsessed. So what costume would you pick to wear if you were going to wear a costume, if it was safe to go trick-or-treating or have a party if you're too cool for that? What costume would you wear? What would be a cool Halloween costume? Or if you don't like Halloween or don't like to celebrate it, just what would be a cool costume to dress up in if you had the right occasion? That's your check-in 6 prompt. So looking forward to reading through those. All right, also this week we do have a reading response due and, of course, your discussion. So as you guys have been doing, I've been really happy and proud to see that you guys are starting those discussions early enough that everybody can chime in and get a full response and sharing of ideas going. Just one note on discussions: make sure they truly are a place where we're exchanging ideas and not just like writing declarations at one another, because we want this to be a generative space, right? We don't want to just come in with these fully formed ideas that we thunk down and then nobody can say anything to them. That's silly. Let's try to have actual dialogue about this stuff. Some of you guys are doing that really excellently, so keep going. Okay, so now I'm going to switch over to my PowerPoint presentation, and I'll talk you guys through the little tiny mini lecture slice of high points from the readings. And then we'll come back here to this screen to talk through your assignment for next week. Okay, so this week we're looking at Chinese rhetorical traditions. And we started with a primary text, as is our pattern. I'm trying to insert as many primary texts into our reading as possible so that we're not just reading about the text, we actually get a chance to expose ourselves to them. So this week you're looking at Confucius's Analects, just the first 2 sections or books. In this piece, you'll notice that there is a primary speaker, sort of like in a Socratic dialogue. This is the master or Master Kong, Confucius. And you notice that this is a lot, maybe similar to the Ptahhotep that we looked at last week. There's a lot of statements that are more proverbial in nature. Philosophical sayings that are directed, in this case, toward a prince or a junzi. So these politically directed teachings are directed toward leaders, civic leaders. And they feature several characters sort of making statements and the master responding to those statements with statements of his own. In these two sections, we're really getting the outline of the character of a good prince or leader. But there is this little moment that's kind of exciting to scholars, and you may or may not have noticed it, but there's like a tiny, what they call a mini biography of Confucius himself in book 2. So see if you can find that. It's kind of fun to like look over. He's using it as a teaching tool, but I think it's interesting that scholars can point to that to see markers from Confucius's life. So overall, not too tricky of a reading, even kind of pleasant and applicable as we think about electing new leaders in our nation. What makes a good leader according to Confucius? So then I'm going to talk to you guys about chapter 1 of this book, Rhetoric in Ancient China. This, if you haven't done your reading yet, this might be a good place to start because it kind of will give you an overview and like a really factual historical summary of rhetorical theory in ancient China. It's really dynamic. It's showing that the term rhetoric was a contested term, just like it was in ancient Greece. And there were many subterms and categories, right? Just like in ancient Greece, people could talk about, oh, no, we should emphasize techne, we should emphasize kairos, what we really need to emphasize, right? And the same thing was happening in ancient China. This piece goes pretty direct in that it's refuting the deficiency model of Chinese rhetoric, which is a really ethnocentric view forwarded in the 1970s that basically said, oh, you know why Chinese rhetoric isn't quite the same as ancient Greek rhetoric is that, the Chinese language really limited. No. The Chinese language does not materially limit the rhetorical strategy, but rather the historical context, as this chapter and other readings that we're doing this week take pains to demonstrate. The Chinese rhetoric was informed by historical, contextual, social structures within which the communication had to operate. So it's important to understand those distinctions, right? Chinese rhetoric is not originating in courts of law like ancient Greek rhetoric was. It's originating not in an albeit very limited and unequal democracy, but in an empirical system wherein authoritarian structure was much more hierarchical than in ancient Greece. This brought stability to the rhetoric, but it also brought a different approach to how you would need to persuade. And I think that this chapter is very interesting because it's going to demonstrate that fact grammatically, contextually, and historically. So I don't know about you, but I thought this was a really fun read myself. Another helpful thing from this chapter is that the diversity of rhetorical traditions is really on display. They're taking pains to show you that it's not monolithic. The rhetoric of ancient China was not limited to or only Confucianism, although that did rise to prominence in the Han Dynasty and did become Confucianism did become the state-sanctioned form of rhetorical theory and study and scholarship. But there were all these other schools too, the Ming school, thinking about probability and relativism, Moism, which was really developing that rational line of argumentation, Taoism, which one of our articles is really going to center on as a transcendental philosophical mode, and then legalism, which was really thinking about centralization of power. So the next article we're going to look at is the Mao article, and this is getting comparative rhetoric in action. Really what this article is doing is looking at Taoism in contrast to Confucianism and legalism as not the same, but as an equally valid form of Chinese rhetoric as an object of scholarship. So here, Mao is trying to put, I'm going to say it, hopefully I'm not going to butcher it too bad, Zhuangzi in dialogue with Aristotle as two comparable contemporary philosophers. So Mao claims to do this to create what he's calling meta discourse or meta-disciplinarity, saying, hey, we don't have to relegate the study of Chinese rhetoric to Chinese studies, but that we could move it into the realm of rhetorical studies writ large. Even though it's not from ancient Greece, it doesn't mean it's not a comparable object of study. And I like the way that Mao does this is by putting forth histories that have previously been ignored or erased. Once again, highlighting Taoism and not Confucianism, which is more widely thought of alongside Chinese rhetoric. But we couldn't leave it, we can't not talk about Confucianism because it was such a centralized part of Chinese rhetoric, especially in the later periods. So we'll look at the U piece and think about how, once again, we hear this word deficiency model and Yu's speaking against it as well and trying to push us away from this idea that the cookie cutter is Aristotelian or ancient Greek rhetorical concepts and everything needs to fit into that cookie cutter. And Chinese rhetoric doesn't fit the cookie cutter, so it must be deficient in some way. Yu is arguing against that and saying we don't need a cookie cutter to impose a shape to this. We need to look at the history of rhetoric in China on its own terms. And I like the way he puts it, saying the materials and conditions native to the text itself. So once again, we're thinking about this contextual view of rhetorical figures and rhetorical theory. So in this piece, Yu is going to analyze the analects in both veins, both that deficit model and show what people have usually pulled from it. And then he's going to provide what he calls a reconstructive or a close reading of the analects. And from that, he says, actually, it's not really anything that you can totally compare to Aristotelian rhetoric because Confucius is doing something different here. Number one, ritualizing the self and the other. And number two, really attending to multimodality in all of the mentionings of symbolic transformation and symbolic identification. We're actually, Yu is arguing, creating something that is not just textual for the words themselves, which, as we know, logos is one of the key tenets of Aristotelian rhetorical strategies. But this is about more symbolic identification, so it's multimodal. It's not just going on the text, the words itself, but the images that it's conjuring for readers and listeners. Although in the end, he does say that if there's any part of Aristotelian rhetoric that we can create kind of a one-to-one comparison with, he points to the epidictic style of rhetoric in Aristotelian rhetorical theory. So that's the ceremonial or display rhetoric. It's more speech-based than it is text-based. And it's also sort of a praise and blame style of rhetorical argumentation, which is something that he can find examples of in Confucius's work. Okay, so that's the high points. I tried to get through them as fast as I could. I'm going to switch back to our Canvas homepage and talk to you guys about our project for next week, and then I will finally close out this video. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk to you guys about is our project for next week. So up here, we already looked at week 6, thinking about Chinese rhetorical tradition. Next week, week 7, we are going to pause in our relentless pursuit of knowledge through reading, and we are going to take a moment to start work on our end of the semester project. So let me talk to you guys about what we're doing. The full assignment for our semester paper, the Curiosity-Led Researching Rhetoric Project. I've got this little GIF of Alice in Wonderland here. I'm hoping to just inspire your creativity. I want you to act on your curiosities. What interests have been piqued as we go through really a survey of various different rhetorical traditions and characters, rhetors, throughout this early history. I want you to act on that curiosity and get deeper into an aspect or an issue that's come up for you in our reading. And it can be whatever you are interested in pursuing in a deeper way, right? We have so many aspects of rhetoric, from its global nature to the issues that it takes up or ignores around race, gender, ethics, class. We've already touched on so many. So there's a lot of contested issues that you could potentially work with for this paper. And in week 7, next week, that's where I want you to start working on it, right? So it's a semester paper. It's a end of term paper. And I want it to be that quality, meaning we're going to start it now. So in theory, you have 8 weeks to work on it. Okay, so I want the quality of analysis and writing and research to be worthy of 8 weeks worth of work. Okay, so you can think about how rhetoric is or should be defined, who does or should get to study it, how and why it should be deployed. You'll pick an issue or a question around rhetoric from this early history and really dive into it. Now, the project is complicated, but it's not that complicated if we break it down into small bite-sized chunks. So the first thing you want to do is explore ideas, and that's what we're going to work on next week. This is really like the brainstorming phase. I want you to create a multimodal presentation. So you can use a screen sharing software, or you can use good old PowerPoint, or anything in between. And I want you to give a multimodal presentation or talk about 2 to 3 topic ideas that you have for this project. Introduce each topic and explain why it might be cool to research or write a paper about. Give it a rating or a score based on how likely you are to pick it. So right now in our homeschool life, I've been giving my daughter little reading journals, like logs to do. She has to read and then she has to give it a star rating. So she chose to do it out of 5 stars. I mean, you could make your symbol for rating, you could make it, how many lobsters do you want to rate it as? How many trees? Do you want your scale to be out of 100? Do you want it to be out of 2? I don't know. You can decide your rating or score system, but basically what you're trying to do is present 2 to 3 potential topics for this semester paper thoroughly. What's going to make it cool or interesting? What's going to make it difficult? What are the pros? What are the cons? And then how likely are you to follow this topic? Maybe they're going to come out neck and neck. Maybe as you go through this process, one topic is just going to become really relevant and interesting to you. Hopefully, by the end of next week, you should be, 98 to 100% sure of what you're going to be researching for the rest of the semester for this project. The rest of the project's pieces are going to be due in about a month and a half. So you're going to develop a reading base by selecting and reading at least 8 substantive articles or an equivalent to that. And you're going to draft a really loose proposal with including a working bibliography, which you're going to present to me. We're going to set up some meeting times in December. You're going to do a write-up. It's not supposed to be long. This is going to be a short conference-style paper, meaning it should be able to be read aloud in about 15 to 20 minutes, so like 8, maybe 10 pages max. That's going to be due on the 9th, or for peer review on the 9th, and then the final paper is going to be due on the last day of class. Additionally, I would like you to write up a reflection paper to think through in writing your whole research and writing process, and that's going to be due on the last day of class as well. Okay, so let me show you where you're going to submit your multimodal brainstorming presentation. Here, right underneath Chat Check-in 7, we've got the midterm multimodal brainstorm presentation. You may notice that I've set it up as a discussion thread, and that's on purpose. I want us to be able to share with each other as a whole class the things that we're interested in and going to work on. So now you're going to articulate what you're thinking in a concrete form. I am hoping that this is fun, okay? I don't want it to be super stressful. I want you to be able to get creative with it and have fun with it. There's no judgment in brainstorming, right? So I've got some steps here for you to go through next week. For example, step 1, free write for 5 to 10 minutes about what's been most interesting so far and why. And then try to write down 3 to 5 main ideas of like possible topics that you might want to work with. Then take a break. Walk it off, shake it off, wait till the next day maybe. After you free write in step 1, take your break, then come back and look at your free writing and use that as a springboard to generate a bulleted list of ideas, like concrete topic ideas, concrete research questions. Your reasons to pursue these topics can be personal, like, hey, I really relate to this in some way. They can be practical, like, I already know a bunch about this, but I'm interested in this new aspect. They can be circumstantial, like, I never heard of this before. Your reasons can connect to the text. It doesn't matter, but you want a list of reasons to go along with these concrete research questions. Then, take another break. When you come back to your free writing and your list of reasons, now you can start pulling all that free writing and all those reasons together as the raw material for your presentation. Pick your top 2 to 3 topics / research questions and all the reasons why they would be cool or not. And then make a short video. Could be a screencast. You could be super lo-fi about it, right? Like you can, I'm thinking of the John Krasinski Some Good News, where he has like signs that are drawn by his daughters, which is adorable. So it could be really lo-fi. You could just like hold up images, visuals. You could get more tech savvy with it by creating a screen share. Whatever you do, your presentation should not be longer than 6 minutes, okay? We're trying to keep it really short and concise, and it's kind of amazing how quickly you think that 6 minutes is going to go, and then you try to fill 6 minutes, and it's an eternity. So no longer than 6 minutes. Again, I have lists of digital platforms for you to use. Once you have your brainstorm video made, you want to attach it to this discussion thread, and we're all going to be able to watch each other's presentations and post comments on them. So I want everybody to commit to commenting on several of your classmates' videos. I think they're going to be really fun to watch. You might get some cool ideas. You might be able to offer them really good feedback or sources or just encouragement. So this is what we're doing next week. Taking some time to start thinking about our project that's going to be due at the end of the semester, and hopefully doing it in a fun way. All right, that does it for me for my week 6 instructor video. If you have any questions about anything I presented in my mini lecture, Or if you have questions about next week's brainstorming multimodal presentation, just feel free to email me. We can also, of course, set up a Zoom office appointment. Office, right? Like office hours, anytime you want to talk, just let me know. Send me an email and we'll set up an appointment. Some of you have already done this, and we have appointments scheduled throughout this week, so keep them coming. I hope you guys are having a great week. Good luck on any other tests or things that you have going. I know we're starting to get into like midterm time, so stay strong, and I will see you in next week's video. Bye, everybody.